Good morning, YouTube. This is my very first video, as you can probably tell, because it's not going to be all that great. But my wife asked me to do a video on the ukulele stand that I built for her. It's a really simple project. Literally, it was completely done out of scrap wood that I had in my barn already. But I tell you what, rather than talking about it, well, let's get into it. It is a relatively easy project, like I said. You could pretty much do it with a drill and probably a handsaw, although I've got tools, so I'm going to use them. But let's get started. Okay, I've collected all of my scraps, and as you can see some of this stuff has been lying around for a bit. But it's always nice to make a project out of stuff that you've already got. It improves your skills, which is something I need. And it's a great feeling to take stuff that's just junk laying around and make something out of it. Now, what I did do was, I should say my wife did this for me. She made out a cardboard cutout of a ukulele in order for me to help me lay everything out originally. Now, I'm going to draw up a set of plans and put them at the end of the video. But anyway, let's get on with our next step. Now our first step is going to be taking the two side pieces that hold the arms up and basically just roughing them into size and getting the basic shape put on them. One of the things I do is, instead of being fancy with set up a compass and everything, we'll just set that on there and we'll draw our lines on there like that. But let me take this over to the saw, get them both cut down to the same size, and I'll show you how I'll lay them out. Okay, we've got the rough shape done. Now we have to take it over to the sander. Okay, after using the spindle sander, this is just a little on the wavy side, so just take a sanding block. Knock that down until you get it nice and flat. And just remember, all you've seen me do today so far can be done with just a piece of sandpaper and some time. Having the tools is nice, but it is not 100% necessary. You can get by with to make this project with some pretty simple hand tools, and that's about it. Now, in order to not have to set this up twice, I got the top curves first. Now I'm just going to trace that bottom one. There's not a whole lot of guesswork here. Cut that out. And since I changed my sander over from the belt sander to the spindle sander, I'll be able to take this over and knock it out real quick. Now that I've got the two leg sections done, now this is something that, if you don't have a spindle sander, you can just be really careful with your jigsaw and try to cut as close as you can on the line. And then you can do all this with a piece of sandpaper and a sanding block. If you don't have a router, which I am going to route all these edges, you can just take and hand sand and knock that edge down. You'll still end up with a pretty nice piece of furniture here. I guess you can call it furniture. Okay, I've got this cut now. The next thing for me to do is to lay out the position of the two dowel rods. Now, my wife did mention that she would like it to be up just a little bit higher. So I'm going to change my dimension on that slightly mark these out, and then we're going to find an appropriate sized drill bit. And this is where it becomes pretty tough, because in order to do this one, I didn't have the right size drill bit, and I had to sand each one of these dowels down until it fit, which is a bit challenging because to get a nice finish on it and a nice tight closing was next to impossible. Well, there's ways to fix that once it's in there. But you're going to get this laid out, get the drill press set up. Now, you don't have to have a drill press, it just makes it nicer. With the drill press set up and get everything laid out and drilled. Dowel rod fit on the whole thing has to be near perfect. You want it good and tight, because that is really what gives the whole thing some rigidity. And it also makes the assembly requires only 4 screws for the whole thing. Now I didn't show you this, or I may show you this, I don't know. But my pilot bit wasn't long enough, and I went to drilling this, and it didn't work out so well. That's why you want to drill a practice hole. By doing that, you'll make sure that your fit is good. Now, you see that's too big, so we need to find something that's going to work for our application here. Let's give this another try. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole drawer full of hole saws, but I do have an 1 1/8 bit, and it's brand new. Let's try it one more time, and let's see what type of a fit we get with this. Well, that's still going to require some sanding, but I think once we put it on the drill press, get a little cleaner hole. It's not ideal, but it will work. We got our 2 legs built. Now we have to build the upright that holds the actual back or the neck of the ukulele up. And I'm just going to take this, I'm going to rough cut it to 20 inches. They need to be about 19, but sometimes it's better off just to go ahead and waste yourself a little bit. And that way, better to cut off a little bit more than it is to, or I should say, it's better to waste an inch than to be an inch short. So when this was figured out, basically by setting this in here, setting my ukulele in there and figuring out where my angle needs to be. And actually, I think I may redo that on this one, just to give myself a little bit better angle on it. I think I made these 2 closer together on this one, so I don't think I'm going to use the exact angle there, and that way I can show you how I laid this out in order to get the angle. That way, if you want to build it for a guitar or a soprano ukulele, you can do that. You can adjust the measurements as needed. Okay, I've got my piece roughly cut to length, and now is where the cardboard template comes in. By using this template, I can get a good feel for where I want this angle to be, how far I want it down, and everything else. So basically, I'm going to get it kind of set in there, and I'm just going to take clamp. Get it where I like it. Bench. Then I'm just going to come back and mark it on the other side so I can angle. Now it's just a matter of taking it to the miter saw, cutting that mitered angle, and the same on both pieces. Okay, this ended up being a 26-degree angle. Got that on the miter saw, got both pieces cut to be identical. Now I've got to drill for my dowel rod that goes to the top. Basically the same thing I did before. Clamp it down, get it in there, and drill them out. And then we'll round, actually I think then we'll round over the edges. Okay, as you can see, I've got my two uprights cut. Did make a little mistake, I got my pole a little off center, which fortunately at this point was easy to fix because all I had to do is just rip this board a little thinner. There's nothing in this project except for the fit between the dowels of these poles that have to be exact. So long as you get everything that I've shown you so far close, your rack is going to be just fine. So now I'm going to take and mark this off, round these two off, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my 3 dowels cut, and in order for them to get into or fit into the holes, I've got to take a little off of them because I'm using old closet rod. Honestly, if you were to go and buy dowel rods, you could get them in an appropriate size. You know, say a 1-inch dowel rod, and then you get a 1-inch drill. It makes the whole thing easier, but I'm cheap. And cut. Okay, you see how that goes through just a little bit. That's okay because we're going to cut all of our, or we're going to sand all of our dowel rods down and fit them. And you're better off to have a little past. That way we can come back with a saw and cut that off and then just sand it flush. It'll be a really nice look. So now I'm going to take and finish that on the other 5 ends of these, and I'll be back. At this point, I'm going to put a round over on all the edges. And one thing that is important is when you're doing the ones for the uprights, you want to stop right at the top of the legs, this area here. So basically I've marked on each one so I can kind of get in there and then just round it out up to here. And this will give you a nice flat connection. One of the trickier parts, and that's laying out the dowels. It's a little tough laying it out on a round, to drill something into a round surface. I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm sure there's probably better ways. Basically, I just set it down on here, myself a pencil, drew myself a line. Perfect, but what I'm going to do now is set it in the drill press, drill right along that line, mark out all my holes. Back in a minute. Okay, to hold the ukuleles in place, I'm going to be using the 3/8 dowel. Basically going to drill some holes and put them in. First thing we want to do is we want to check to make sure that we've got the right bit. So basically I'm just going to drill a 3/8 hole in here to make sure that I get a good tight fit. That should do quite well. So now it's just a matter of getting everything lined up. And basically you just take and measure the thickness of the neck of your ukulele and figure out how many you want. I mean, you can make this hold 2, 1, or 20, just depending on how long you make it. Now it comes down to one of the things that I really dread doing, because it's really tough to get these all lined up even with the drill press. But in order to put the dowels in, you've got to drill holes and set the dowels in the holes. This is the best way I came up with. I'm sure there's better ways of doing it. If you're using a hand drill, you're going to have to be really careful to set things up. I mean, they do sell actual jigs for doing this, so that might be a consideration. But here we go. Oh. Doesn't look too awful terrible. Anyway, now for sanding. More sanding, more and more sanding. Now, this is one of the advantages of having the cardboard cut out, or you could just bring your ukulele in and set it in place. This gives you a good idea. I mean, you can move this forward and backward to how much the tilt you want. I'm going to put it about right here. That gives me almost, don't have to have it off against the wall if you want to push it up against the wall. That looks good to me. So now it's a matter of sanding, and more sanding until I get to a point where I get everything smooth, and we'll be ready for assembly. Oh, one last thing, I do need to cut the dowels to length, but I don't think I need to show that. Pretty sure everybody's capable of cutting them off. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. We've got all of our parts sanded, ready for assembly. I've got 4 screw holes that have to be laid out so we can attach the side pieces to it. And I have to cut 10 of these dowel rods. And what I've done is I've placed a stop block here, and I'm going to use the miter fence on my saw, my table saw, and just knock these out. I mean, the cuts don't have to be perfect. We're going to sand it when we get done. So let's go. Now we need to take the dowels and just basically give them a little chamfer on the edges, sand them down, get them nice and smooth. This is the only thing I've ever used it, or the only time I've ever used a set of plans to build something. This is Drew Fisher's from Fisher's Shop. $5 for the plans, very well thought out. Okay, we've got all of our dowels cut. We've got our glue, and it's as simple as finding some pliers to get the glue open, and coming back and put a little glue in each hole. I think might be this. Chamfer on the other side of these so they go in a little bit easier. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Got a little bit of chamfer put on it. And now it's just a matter of okay, now that we've got the dowels put in there and we're waiting for the glue to dry, I'm taking mark center of this, and we want to get the screw hole set. Let's mark along the center. Let's mark both of them at one time. Remember you've got that flat side on one side that goes up against the legs. And make sure that you got it in the right spot. Okay, now we're going to drill just large enough for this to go in. These are some wooden plugs that I found. Silly bastards. And that's what we're going to use to cover up the screws. Okay, I decided to not take my chances with trying to hand drill these. I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes out in them on the drill press. Now when you're doing this, if you leave just a little flag on your tape, you'll be able to see when it gets to the bottom of it, it'll actually clear the chips away and be real obvious. You just don't want to go too far and get it off, because then your subsequent holes will be too deep. Okay, now that I've got the uprights drilled and countersunk for the plugs, I'm going to put some starter holes, clamp it into place, drill some starter holes, and put together. Now I'm not going to glue this together because I think my wife is going to do something with it. I don't know that she's going to try to sell it on her YouTube channel or she's going to give it away. But I want to make it so it's easy to ship, and by being able to take the side pieces off, it'll be easy to ship. Now it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. Alright, now this may not be the most accurate way of doing this, but I took an angle finder, set the angle on this one, measured from here to the edge, set my speed square up, so I was right there, set the angle finder in there like that. Now I'm relatively sure I'm in the right spot. And I can drill my holes. Now, I didn't mark the depth on that. Probably could have got by without drilling holes, actually. The pilot hole always gives you a little better start and less chance of getting it split. And I should have probably marked that to make sure that I didn't drill all the way through. Alright, so I'm going to clean things up a little bit. I'm going to hit this stuff with sandpaper one more time before I assemble it, and I'll be back. Okay, there you have it. I've got the final dry fit before I put glue on it. This is what I use my cardboard cutout for. It gives me an idea how they're going to sit inside of it. And I did kind of get these out of alignment. You can't really notice it unless you look at it close, but I'm kind of aiming that way. They always say you're never supposed to point out your mistakes, but I figured that doing this and not pointing out my mistakes is the right way to do it. Because if I make a mistake, that means that you may not make it if I tell you about it. So just make sure that when you do this, keep the alignment. I must have got it turned just a little bit when I was drilling those last couple out, and they came out a little cattywampus. Okay, so I'm not going to film me gluing this up. I'm pretty sure everybody knows how to glue something together. Once you've dry fitted it, you want to make sure that it'll sit nice and flat once you get it glued. And I will glue it up and come back. Okay, the battery in my camera has died, so I'm going to finish this up with my phone here. Off camera there, after the camera died, I cut those dowels off with a pull saw and then sanded everything down. We got it all ready. Now I'm going to take and wipe it down with some mineral spirits and then come back once that's dry and hit it with tung oil. The first one I made I did with shellac, which worked out really nice, but I kind of want to see what it looks like with the tung oil. Okay, that's what it looks like just being wiped down with mineral spirits. Remember, anytime you're finishing something with a flammable
finish or using mineral spirits and such like that in your shop, make sure that you get that. So take those rags and put them out someplace where they'll dry, where it'll be safe, before throwing them in the trash. You want all of the solvent to be out of it. Anyway, we'll come back after I put some tongue oil on it, and we'll get another look.